All right, so we're going holding by Pirkei Avos again. We're going holding by Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers. This is chapter 2, Mishnah 16. And part 63, there'll be a part 64, 65, I'm sure. Again, we're going holding by Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers. We're in chapter 2, Mishnah 16. And we've been speaking about the evil inclination, the Yitzhar. The Mishnah says, in the name of Rabbi Yeshua, an evil eye, evil inclination, hatred of other people, remove a person from this world. I spoke last week about how the evil inclination fights very hard, right, against the persons. We've spoken about before. Yeah, makes them hard, gives them difficult trials so we can work on character development. As the Gemara says in Kedushin 31:8, greater is the one who's commanded to do mitzvahs, right, and does them is more than someone who's not commanded to do mitzvahs and does them. Meaning, as we spoke about, the evil inclination works much harder against one commanded to keep the mitzvahs, even though it doesn't mean the evil inclination doesn't stop someone who's not, doesn't have an obligation of mitzvahs per se, but it's less, right? It's a lot less. Now on that says Mori Rebbe, Arav Agon or Moshe Lita should be well, and his commentary on Pirkei Avos. So he mentions not only, as we said before, that greater is the one who's commanded to do mitzvahs and does them more than someone else, right? Who's not commanded and does them. Again, the power of the evil inclination, very good. So then he says on that the amount of reward a person receives will depend on the amount of effort they put in. Yeah, so in days, so I have to explain what that means. But in days where the power of evil is so strong, and the ways the person can fall are so numerous, right? A lot of different ways the person can fall. In general, all the more so is the rewards when a person stays on a straight and narrow path, does not give in to the evil inclination. Now, this is a much bigger topic, right? Much bigger topic, and that is what's he telling you, right? What's he telling you over here? So he's telling you Lefitzahagra, right? What does Lefitzahagra mean? That the amount of pain that a person is in, depending on what it is the amount of reward they're going to get, right? So therefore, whatever a person either goes through, or let's say better, what they do, so that means that the rewards for the pain and the difficulty, is much greater, right? It's much greater. Now, someone will say, well, isn't it better not to have to go through it? True. Right? Most people would say, I'd rather not have the trial. I'd rather not have to go through it if possible. Okay. It's usually not an option. Yeah, we go through whatever we go through anyway. But the reward that a person gets for going through it, right, and hopefully, surviving the test, the reward is exponential. The reward is really exponential, right? So as it says over here, that the amount of reward a person receives will depend on what they go through. It will depend on the amount of effort that they put in. So if a person in general stays on the straight and narrow path, and they are going to continue and go in that way, regardless of what the trial they're going through, so the reward is going to be exponential. In other words, if it's an easier trial, right? Let's say, we'll make it relatively easy, no pun intended. If a person has an easier trial, whatever that trial may be, right? For that person, let's say it's an easier trial. Okay. So if it is something that is easy to overcome, okay. So if a person goes through it, person overcomes it. So what would the reward be? What they went through. In other words, if it wasn't so hard to go through, let's say, so the reward will be less, right? The reward will be commensurate with the effort that the person puts in, yeah? And the amount of pain, let's say a person goes through. So if the pain isn't as great, right? So what would we say? So the reward shouldn't be so great. But if the pain is great and the pain is hard, no matter what it may be, right? Whether it's physical pain, literally physical pain, or whether it's, going through hardship in spiritual terms, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what a person goes through. If it's an easier thing to overcome, they overcome it. So the reward probably isn't as great. If they go through it, and it's something much harder, yeah, if it's something much harder, then what's going to happen? And exponentially they'll get a reward. Why? Because that's measure for measure, right? That's how measure for measure works. In other words, if someone's going through a tremendous hardship, whatever it may be, so then the rewards, measure for measure, should be commensurate with what they went through the amount of pain that they went through. Now, does it matter what it is? Doesn't matter. Right? Again, it could be physical pain. Yeah, literally it could be physical pain. It could be suffering. Not necessarily physical pain. Person's having, hardship. Let's say, with livelihood, with family, with other things. It doesn't have to be physical pain, right? If it sure does not have to be, does not have to be physical pain. Okay. But it would make sense that the amount of rewards, where's that going to be? Right? Oh, I'd say better. What does that mean? The amount of reward means the amount of pain that a person went through. The amount of reward, right, should equal that or surpass it. Right? And again, we don't always do the right thing even when we suffer, and have the right reaction. That's all true. But nonetheless, Marabier points out that the evil inclination is going to come. And the evil inclination knows how powerful it is. And there are many ways for a person to fall. Okay. All the more so, the reward for a person who stays the straight and narrow path doesn't give in to the evil inclination. Now, what would we say? What would we say in general? We'd say, okay, it's wishful thinking. Right? Because that's not what happens a lot of times. Why? Because a person goes through hardship. And again, does not matter. Does not matter what the hardship is. They go through the hardship and they suffer. And let's say, even though they have difficulty, what's going to end up happening? Let's say they survive and they stay on the straight and narrow path. So God looks down and says, wow, look at this warrior. Look how strong they are. Yeah. Look at the difficulty they go through and they still get up and pray. Look at the difficulty they go through and they still make blessings or whatever they're obligated to do. Right? So God looks down and says, wow, it's a huge thing. It's an unbelievable thing. No matter why you're going through it. Right? And that's not even the point. The point is you're going through it. Right? And because a person is able to stay on the straight and narrow path, which is not a given, because a lot of people would rather give up. A lot of people would rather say, you know what, it's just too hard. There's no point. I'm not going to overcome this. It's very hard to, get over the hump, let's say. So why bother? Why bother? People, let's say, the process of conversion will say it's too hard. They make it too hard, and it's not fair, and it's not this, and it's not that. Okay, no one says you have to convert. No one says it's an obligation to convert. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's also part of the test. Could there be corruption? Yeah. But it's also part of the test. Right? Anyone who wants to drop out, they can drop out. We're not looking for converts anyway. Right? Complaining is not going to help. They may vent, and they say, it's not fair, and this happened, that happened. Okay, what they did. The question is not how you deal with it. Yeah, can it be painful? Yeah. Can it be aggravating? Yeah. Okay. No one says you have to go through it, though. So don't convert. No one says you get an obligation to go through it. At the same time, person realizes, it's all part of the bigger picture. Right? It's all part of the test. Very good. What's going to happen in general? The reward for going through it and the pain is going to be commensurate plus, multiply infinity, what you're going to get. Problem is, as we always say, when a person gets beaten down alive, it's hard to see that. It's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Right? It's hard to see. Doesn't mean there won't be. A person could go through other difficulty, all the way through. Okay. Right? But the evil inclination comes, and the evil inclination said before, is testing, people that, want to be righteous, want to go on the right path, very good. As we said before, people say, but it's not fair, it's not right, and why do I have to go through this? Right? In general, the answer would be, we don't know. Right? But it's all essentially part of the test. Right? But at the end of the day, what do we see? We see that the rewards is going to be dependent upon the amount of effort you put in. Right? In other words, the amount of suffering a person went through and the amount of effort a person got to put in, that's going to be the reward. Plus, but what's the real test? What essentially is the real test? The real test is that when a person goes through whatever they go through, doesn't really matter, right? Totally irrelevant what they go through. But whatever they go through, the test is going to be, what's my reaction? How do I react? Do I throw in the towel? Do I yell and scream and say life isn't fair? Some would. I can understand. I'm not coming to judge it. But what's the reaction? So the Rebbe would say the reaction, it's understandable, considering what a person goes through. But a person, as we always say, has to be like the Rock of Gibraltar. No matter what happens, the person has to continue forward, right, in spiritual terms. And what does Moreno Rabbeinu, the Yetzer Hara, wants? So Yetzer Hara wants the person to be broken, right? That we've spoken about. But since it's so easy to fall, since it's so easy to be tempted over here, right, in general, what happens? What happens? Either, again, the person's going to get broken from it, but if they stay strong, they stay in the straight and narrow path, they don't give in. Now, again, someone will say, that's wishful thinking. Easier said than done. But people go through all kinds of hardship. True? Right? No one's denying that. The question is, since the evil inclination comes, it makes life so hard, and puts the person, let's say, into a corner, to stay in the straight and narrow path, not so easy. And it makes sense why it's not so easy. But as we always say, you don't grow without trials. We say every day, God shouldn't bring me to trials. We say that in our prayers in the morning. At the same time, it's catch-22. Don't bring me to trials and tribulations, but if you don't have them, you don't grow. And we do understand, hopefully over time, we see that the trials we go through, what does it do? It shapes who we are. It forms who we are. Now, a person may say, I would rather not have had the challenge, but since I had the challenge, since I went through it, I'm glad I went through it. Because it should change the person who they are. Right? Major ways, minor ways. It gives the person the ability to think, what is life all about? And sometimes the person only asks the question, obviously, when things go wrong. So imagine most of a person's life, financially they're successful, right? Let's say they don't have too many problems. I mean, they don't have to work hard. They work hard. They've been blessed. Very good. So let's say they can travel when they want. They have an extra house they can go to. Different things. Okay. Now, what happens? Let's say at a relatively young age, right? Again, we'll say, early 60s, relatively young today. Yeah, someone in the early 60s, diagnosed with the C word, cancer. Now, let's say for argument's sake, let's say it's not, it's not one that's going to be very aggressive, so to speak. So, there are ways to fight it and hopefully go through remission, right? And all that. But what happens here? Person's successful, healthy, can travel, kids, let's say, grandkids, all the good things in life, let's say. And now they get this diagnosis. Now, even if it's something that can be cured, even if it's something someone will be in remission for, or potentially be in remission for, what happens now? Their lives automatically change. Their lives have changed overnight. Why? Because there's a looming threat. Now, if it was much more advanced and there's not much treatment they can do, or they'll try and do what they can do, but the prognosis isn't good, right? Let's say. That's worse. Now they've been thrown into a situation where what happens? They've been thrown into a situation where they don't know what's going to be. Literally. Take months. Maybe it could take years. I don't know. Whatever it is. Right? Yeah, it could take years. Or maybe not. Let's say, for argument's sake, it's relatively short. Let's say the doctors say, we'll treat it, we'll do what we can. We give you 6 months. We give you a year, let's say. The life is over. Everything up until this point, no matter what they have, no matter how much they travel, this, that, what's going on, their life is finished. They know their days are numbered. And why didn't they know their days were numbered before? Because nobody thinks about it. You're relatively healthy, you wake up tomorrow, same thing, okay, you get a cold here or there, whatever, but nothing major. Their life just changed overnight. It's going to be my kids, grandkids, my spouse. Why didn't I think about that before? Why didn't they live their lives like today's their last? As the Mishnah Pirkei Avos says. You got to repent the day before you die. We spoke a lot about that. How do you know the day before you die? You don't. Nobody knows when they're going to die. You got to repent every day. Unless tomorrow you don't wake up or something happens. Okay. Now, even if that's true, don't we take health for granted? Take health for granted. Many people know I grew up among adults when I was a kid, and people would say, even in their 40s, they would say, if you don't have your health, you have nothing. That is true to a point. It's true to a point. Because you have to know what you're living for. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't know what they're living for. So now you think somebody early 60s, let's say mid 60s, will be generous. Mid 60s, now they get a diagnosis. That doesn't mean they're going to die tomorrow. Let's say, we'll be a little bit generous here. Let's say they're not going to die tomorrow. They have to go through treatment. Okay. What does the treatment come with? A lot of uncomfort. Right? A lot of discomfort. Who's there? Potentially. Physically sick. No appetites. Everything goes along with it. But at the end of the day, let's say it works. Okay. Or whatever, to a certain extent, whatever it does. What's happened over here? Person's body's been compromised. And their mentality is now shot. Their outlook is now very grim. They tell me, let's say they beat it, they're in remission. Okay. Now, let's say that would be the case. Best case scenario. How do they live their lives afterward? God gave them a reprieve. God gave them the ability to carry on. Okay, the body might be weaker, immune system might be a little bit weaker. Okay. But eventually, they're going to be able to live for a number of years. They should be able to live. It could be a lot of years. We'll be even more generous if he doesn't come back. Or maybe he comes back, 10 years later. Let's say. What's the issue over here? The issue is this person understands, okay, I beat it. It didn't spread. Caught it very early stage. Not an aggressive form. Very good, but what's the person thinking, though? They may be thinking I got lucky. They may be thinking I got a new leash on life, maybe. Or more, that could be. But my guess is they're also thinking, even though they're in remission, they're a walking time bomb. Now, why are they a walking time bomb? Because in general, I don't know what the stats are. I'll take a guess, though, for what it's worth. It usually comes back. Sometimes. Maybe more stronger or less strong, I don't know. It can come back. Now, the doctors can say it's in remission. Very good. So when it's in remission, what do they do every 3 months, 6 months? They'll do tests to make sure it's gone. That could go on for 10 years. Go on for 5 years. Right? Anywhere in between, okay. And then they go for a routine checkup, 3 months later, 6 months later, came back. That's the biggest fear. The biggest fear is that it returns. Or, let's say better, that it possibly returns. So this person now, let's say, or if they're working, traveling, whatever they're doing, okay. Whatever they're doing, they have this issue. So they got a new lease on life. But they're thinking in the back of their minds, or maybe in the front of their mind, and that is, how do I know it's totally gone? You don't know for sure. 100% you don't know for sure. Could it come back? Sure. Should it come back in a vengeance? Yeah. But here you got a new lease on life. What about a case where, which would be even worse, person got a diagnosis stage 4. Stage 4, that's bad. Right? Depending where it is. What's the best case scenario? One of these things, a year, 6 months, maybe 5 years. I know someone got diagnosed early 50s with stomach cancer. There was stomach cancer. Yeah, try different things, whatever. And according to the stats, about 5 years. Usually about 5 years. For the last year and a half. Year and a half. Person gets diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, even less. Again, now, there's another aspect here. The other aspect is, no matter what the doctors say, what are they basing what they say on? On statistics, on what they know. What they know from, let's say, hundreds of thousands of cases. Okay? So let's say such a case, they would tell you, according to the stats and, the chemo, whatever it does, the stats are, I get 6 months. If you're lucky, maybe you get a year. Maybe. Let's say. Now, the problem is, doctors, they're going on what their eyes see. What are they not going on? What God sees. So this week's parsha, at the end of the first Aliyah, the verse says, Rape Yirape. The person can be surely healed. That means doctors are given permission to heal. Yeah, but who does the ultimate healing? God does the ultimate healing. Right? We've spoken about this before. I don't want to harp on it, too much. What can a doctor today heal? Flesh wounds. Right? Something on the flesh they could heal. But inside the body, what can God, who's going to heal it? Who's going to heal it? God's going to heal it. Because man doesn't have the ability to heal on the inside. Now, based on that, surgeon, let's say he does surgery, says, okay, this should happen, that should happen, to give all the different scenarios and what they see because of the body, and how strong the body is. Let's say to fight it. But in general, they'll say, if they're honest, they'll say, we've done everything we can. They'll say, okay, this could happen, that could happen, get an infection, other things, okay. That all could happen. The way we see it, this shouldn't happen, and this is what should happen. Okay. When they stitch up the person, and they've done what they were supposed to do, let's say, if they stitched up the person, they have to be honest enough to say, there's nothing more we can do. We have to see how the body's going to react. Now, based on statistics, again, based on the age of the patient, based on the health of the patient, let's say, they can make a diagnosis. They can say, wow, the patient's healthy, should take this long to recover, that long to recover. There could be, what do you call it? There could be infection, other potential things could happen, but let's say, all things being equal, this is what should happen, and that's what happens. Very good. They got it right. But they throw out the other scenarios. Possibility what could happen. But they have to be honest, and they have to say, we've done everything we can do. We did what we're supposed to do, according to all the protocols, this, that. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Now, what does that mean in the vernacular? They have to see how the body's going to react. The body reacts the way they think it should, good. The body could not react the way they think. Without infection. The famous statement here, you can say it anywhere, right? They say that the surgery was successful, but the patient died. You can have surgery being successful, but the body could handle it. Maybe they expected the body to handle it. Okay. You can also make mistakes. What's the bottom line over here? The bottom line is, once they stitch up the patient, then the healing process does not come from the doctor. Because whatever happens on the inside, God will make it happen one way or the other, either for good or for bad. Because whatever happens on the inside, however it's going to heal, man has no ability to heal it. If there's infection, they can treat it. If they have to reopen, they reopen. They take something out, put something in. I don't know, whatever it is. Yeah, okay. But once they seal the person up, they cannot say definitively what's going to happen on the inside. I mean, they could in theory. That'd be the ultimate being conceited, saying, okay, blood should heal like this and like that. And God can say, well, you don't know. You don't know. It could happen in other ways also. They have no way. They have no way of knowing. That's the point. Doctors have no way of knowing. They cannot say 100%. Right? You take any doctor, let's say the best specialist in the world, and whatever it is, and you tell the doctor, okay, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen when you seal up this person? They'll say, well, according to everything, we see, this, that, and the other thing should happen based on the person's age, based on their health. Very good. So then you tell the doctor, okay, that's the way you see it. Are you willing to put your money where your mouth is? Put a bet. Would you bet $50,000 that you're right? I think big. Would you bet $100,000 that you're right? Even better. Right? Let's make it an interesting wager. Whatever your life savings is, doesn't matter where it is or what it's in. Are you willing to put your life savings down on the line and say this is going to happen 100%? I'm not so sure people would do it. Even if they think they're right. They could say it's 1,000,000 to 1 shot that something could go wrong. Okay. It's 1,000,000 to 1 shot. Let's say. Are they willing to put, all the money they have in the world and wager it? If the odds are like, 1,000,000 to 1, some may say yes. I'll put my money where my mouth is. Yeah? What if it's a lot less than that? What if majority of times it should be okay? Let's say you got a 60% chance everything should come out right. You think they're going to put all their money down? I don't think so. I would think it's even less of a chance anything's going to go wrong. Right? Coppin would say, you take this with a grain of salt, they also won't put money down. They won't put all their money down. Why not? Because they cannot give 100% guarantee. Why can't they give 100% guarantee? Because they don't know for sure. When they sew up that person, again, bottom line, what's going to happen in the inside, they can't say for sure. They can't say 100% for sure. They can say 80% for sure. Maybe they can say 90% for sure. But even if a person knew 90%, like the odds are so slim, I'm not so sure they're going to take the wager. At least for that kind of money. Maybe for a lot less money, maybe. Right? But again, every last penny that you have, you put it down on the table and give me 100% guarantee that's going to happen. Right? Put all the money on the table. Not part of it. Right? I think big. Right? Always think big. Put all the money down on the table. How many doctors will be do that? I don't know so many would. Again, you tell me it depends on the odds, depends on this, depends on that. I don't care what it depends on. Right? That's my question. You think you know? You think you're in charge? Guarantee me. You give me a guarantee. Right? I'll say even better. Someone, let's say, a certain type of cancer. Let's say blood cancer. Blood cancer, I think, between up to 5 years, let's say, whatever. Right? So you tell the doctor, okay, you got to treat it this way, that way, the other way. You know what the odds are. You know what the stats are. I said, put all your money down and say it's going to be at least 5 years. At least 5 years, not 1 year, not 6 months, not 4.5 years. 5 years. That's the maximum, let's say, maximum amount of time. Put 5 years down. Are they going to do it? They'll never do it. Why won't they do it? Because it's unpredictable. They don't know how the radiation is going to affect the person. Yeah, it can make their body much weaker, obviously, right? And if it's relatively aggressive form, it makes the body weaker. Yeah, it can take less time. But this is something you know, right? Let's say it's between 1 and 5 years. Right? Even better, not 5 years. You say, put down all your money for 3 years. 2.5 years. Nobody's going to do it. Nobody in their right mind would do it. Why? Because it's unpredictable. We say, okay, cancer's different because it's unpredictable. Okay. Make something easier. Yeah, someone, I don't know, whatever the surgery is. Whatever the surgery is. Can they guarantee 100% what's going to happen or not? After you stitch up the body. Can they give a guarantee? They can't give a guarantee. They'd be foolish to give a guarantee. You can sue them if they gave a guarantee. Right? Because even if they gave a guarantee, they're not putting it in writing. Guarantee, they're not putting it in writing. Even verbally, they'll be very careful what they say. Because what could happen? The person come back and say, hey, you said this. It didn't happen. So yeah, I'm speculating. I didn't say this fact. I didn't say bottom line, this is going to happen. You can take my word for it. I didn't say that. They're going to be very careful. They don't want to get sued. Yeah, okay, but they can't guarantee. They have no possible way of guaranteeing. Now, how do I know that to be true? First of all, they can't heal on the inside. Right? That's for sure. They stitch up the body. They don't know what's going to happen. But I got a better guarantee. A better guarantee is let them make a wager, everything they own. They have a lot to lose. That's what they bet. They have everything to lose. If they have everything to lose, they're not going to make that bet unless they know 100%. And in this case, there's no way to know 100%. Again, even if it's 95%, are they going to put all their money down? I don't think so. Right? If it's 50-50, they won't put their money down, for sure. If it's higher than that, they probably wouldn't do it. Why not? This is the proof. The proof is they can't guarantee. What if it's one in a million chance that something goes wrong? Let's say they diagnose somebody, they say, okay, you have let's say, God forbid, a person gets lymphoma. Yeah. And they say, okay, person's got lymphoma, start radiation, whatever, start treatment. They give the person a year. Let's say they give a person a year. It's terminal. Okay. They give or take a year. Okay. What happens? Let's say that night, they don't even start treatment. They diagnose somebody. Okay. And let's say in the middle of the night, even before they started any treatment, a person's not feeling well, all their vitals go down, right? All their major organs start to go. What happens? They call the family and say, we don't know what's going on over here, but the whole body's shutting down. Yeah. But what did they say before? They had the vitals. They had the information. They say, nothing's imminent. You got up to a year. It's terminal. Okay, we'll start, prepping for radiation, this, that, whatever. And they don't make it through the night. That's a serious mistake. Now, how could they make such a serious mistake? What do they miss? They obviously miss something, right? Or they didn't miss anything. They called it according to nature what they saw. And because they called it according to what they saw, they didn't take in one factor. They didn't take in the godly factor. Because the godly factor said the person's not going to make it through the night. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, this person is condemned to die that night. Could they have foreseen that? No, not in this case. Yeah, the person had it, very good. They did not expect the person to die overnight. That wasn't even a question in the diagnosis. They'll see, okay, see how the body reacts. Try and treat it a certain way, very good. It's terminal, okay, but try and do whatever we can do, okay. But this is a very good case, because this is something that actually happened. Yeah. There's a totally misdiagnosis. Meaning, maybe they got it right, the person had lymphoma, okay. Let's say they got it right. They got it right. Where did they make the mistake? What did they miss? Maybe they missed anything. They said, this is the way we see it. It is terminal, but nothing's going to happen right now. Okay. Nothing's going to happen. We'll treat it. We'll see where it goes. Okay, that's being honest. Now, if you'd have pinned them down, and you would have, and then all of a sudden, right, let's say in the middle of the night, the vitals start going down, taking all the major organs, that's it. That's it, the body shut down. Now, if now you ask them afterwards, what happened over here? You said it's not imminent, at least up to a year, we'll start treatment, we'll see where it goes. Very good. What happened over here? Was it wishful thinking? And what's their answer going to be? Can tell you exactly what their answer is going to be. We don't know. We don't know what happened. From what we saw, that's what it showed. So what does that answer tell you? That answer tells you they're not in control. That's what it tells you. They made a prediction based on what they saw. Yeah, again, if they started, doing treatment, the body couldn't handle it, okay, it would have been a different diagnosis. Right? Instead of a year, it would have been 6 months or 3 months, or depending on the strength of the person, the body. Okay, depending how much, chemo, whatever they were going to do, is going to affect the body. Yeah, that much they could say. What happened over here? They'll say, well, we blew it. Very good. That is true. 100% you blew it. Yeah. But what's their answer going to be? They don't know. Maybe they'll say, well, in cases like this, sometimes this happens. That's very rare. If a person gets a diagnosis, they die that night, that's very rare. Maybe. But they can say, from what our eyes saw, from all the information we had, we didn't think anything's imminent. There's no reason to think anything is imminent. We weren't lying. They called it the way they saw it. Okay. I can give them the benefit of the doubt. They called it the way they saw it. They didn't see a problem. A short-term problem. Long-term problem, yeah. But I didn't see anything in the short term. Very good. So what does it tell you? They don't know. 100% they don't know. And they can't tell you. So no matter what they do, on the inside of a person, they have nothing to say. They have nothing to say how the body's going to be healed. So comes along the Torah and says, doctors have the ability to heal. God gives them permission to heal. Very good on the outside. On the inside, even if they do an operation, even quote unquote they are successful, the healing does not come through them. And it would be impossible to think that it would. Because everyone's going to say, once they stitch up the person, what happens on the inside that's not in their control. 100% is not in their control. And everyone thinks it's in their control. They're lying. Not because of what the Torah says. Right? It has nothing to do with what the Torah says here. What does it have to do with? The fact that the body heals by itself. Or not. But who's the ultimate healer? It doesn't heal by itself, it heals by God. On the inside. Because when that body's closed, what's going to happen on the inside? Nobody knows. It's like playing Russian roulette. You don't know. If they say what they say is true, very good. And it works the way they say it, okay. So they got it right. But if they say, listen, this could happen, that could happen, and those things do happen, they're complications, okay, right? There can be complications. They have to say that. And what the possible consequences are, okay, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. So they'll tell you. Yeah, why did this happen? Oh, because of this. Why did that happen? Because of this. Okay. But there are some things, okay, that are much more complicated that they don't know. They try this, that didn't work. Try that didn't work. Try something else. Read stories all the time about this. Misdiagnosis. Yeah, but there is misdiagnosis. It almost kills people. Yeah. Now you say they're only human. That's the point. They're only human. No matter what world-class knowledge they have or not. They can't, they can make mistakes. I'm sure they can make mistakes. But again, they can, they can see scans and blood tests and this and that and say, oh, it's this, but it's something else. Cause the pain, patients in more pain, more difficult. They don't know what to do. They try this, they try that, try the other thing. Right? Again, it goes to show they're not infallible. Even though, people worship medicine and worship science. Okay, but it's not infallible. In many cases, misdiagnosis, and by the time they, it took them a couple of years, let's say, to find what the real diagnosis was, and it could have been masqueraded by other things, could be a complicated thing, whatever it is. But everybody agrees. Everybody agrees how the body's going to heal on the inside, they have no control. And no doctor, unless they're like absolutely so conceited or the odds are like so high it would never happen, is willing to put every last dollar they own, no matter where it is, and put it on the table and say this 100% will happen. Now, if it's a very high percentage it won't happen, maybe they would, okay. Yeah, but at the end of the day, are they going to take that chance? I don't think most people would take that chance, even if the odds are very high. Then nothing bad's going to happen. Yeah, then everything's going to come out the way they think. But they can't say 100%. So now with those words of introduction, somebody now, as we said, let's say they're in the mid-60s, many, many years. Let's say, they've worked hard, lived a life around, traveled, this, that, summer home, this, that. Now they get diagnosis. Now, it could be up to 5 years, it could be 3 years, maybe it could be longer, etc. This changes the way a person thinks now. Now, a person will get it one of two ways. Maybe a few different ways. Yeah. Why do I say one of two ways? One way is they know they're sealed with fate. Their fate is sealed. They know, okay, they're not coming out of this, right? The only question is, can they push it off? What's going to be the quality of life? How's it going to take a toll on them? Like a lot of different questions. And they're going to be resigned to the fact that they're going to die. Right? Now, the only question is when. Are they going to take 2 years? Is it really going to take up to 5 years? How's the treatment going to affect it? They don't know. They can guess, but they don't know for sure. So, on the one hand, they'll say their fate is sealed. And they'll look at it like, okay, it's a good life. Enjoy life. had kids, seen grandkids, very good, plenty of money, not lacking anything, have traveled, have this, have that. Okay, it's been a good life. Even though they could die before 70. Right? Which again, in today's day and age, is young. Right? Relatively speaking. That's one way to look at it. Now, another way to look at it is they can be totally depressed, knowing that, they really want to live. They certainly don't want to die, and they got everything to live for, right? They have a spouse, let's say, they have kids, they have grandkids, they have what to live for. But now they're looking death in the eye, straight in the eye. What could that do? On the other hand, it can make them think and say, what am I living for? Is this what it's all about? Going on vacation and playing golf and doing other things. Yeah. Again, they worked hard. They made a lot of money. Very good. God helped them, obviously. But now they say, wait a minute. I got everything to live for. I have money. I have family. I have grandkids, whatever. I have what to live for. So they can ask, but why is this happening? Shouldn't happen when I'm this young. Question about life being fair. Right? Why is this happening? Right? It's another way to look at it because, they're not going to see, at this point, there's another option, but get to the other option shortly. They're going to see things as being unfair now. Because they're young, relatively young. Okay, what happened in 10 years? They probably still complain, but let's say, what happened when, 10 years later? What happened in their 80s? Okay, you guys more or less over anyway. Right at that age. Yeah, so what happened later? But what's the problem with that mentality? What's the problem? Because now they're saying, well, they're not saying, well, I lived a good life. I'm ready to say goodbye. They don't want to say goodbye. They're not interested in leaving this world. They enjoy this world. They enjoy this world a lot. They eat what they want. They travel, this, that. They got a nice life. Right? In physical terms. Right? So now the person can say, I'm not saying it's right. They could say, but why me? Why did this happen to me? It's one thing, a person's struggling, they have other hardships, this and that. Just that, this will add to it. Maybe make it worse. I haven't had too many hardships. I mean, everyone has problems, okay. But in this case, let's say they don't have so many problems. Money can disguise problems also. They have money, they travel, they do other things. They can easily say that this shouldn't be happening. Why is this happening to me? And they may even invoke him, say, life isn't fair. They say life isn't fair. Why should I get this when I'm so young? Now, what's the answer to that? What do you mean life isn't fair? You've been living the last 30, 35 years the life of Riley. You're living with plenty of money, traveling, be able to do whatever you want, and all of a sudden, you're not thankful for anything. Let's say, in God's eyes. So now you're saying it isn't fair. Right? Again, it doesn't mean they get off scot-free not having any problems. Yeah, they've had problems. Well, let's say, the most important problem besides health, they haven't had. Which is livelihood. It's probably the single biggest problem most people have besides health. Okay, and family. Okay. But see, you can't say that. That's speaking from both sides of your mouth. You can't say life isn't fair. What do you mean? Look at the life you've had the last 30 years. Look at all the places you've been. Look what you celebrated. Look, So what do you mean life isn't fair? God gave you plenty. Plenty. Plenty of money and everything that goes with it. Travel, fun, this, that, very good. But you can't say life isn't fair. If life wouldn't be fair, in general, maybe you're living on the streets. Maybe you're an abused family. Maybe even if you have a roof over your head. Yeah, maybe there are all kinds of other problems. And you can tell me life isn't fair. It's physical abuse, psychological abuse, all kinds of things. Not to mention, financial issues. Then you could ask me the question. Then you can say life isn't fair. You're living life wrongly. You're living life, plenty of money, no complaints. I mean, you didn't work hard. Okay, God helped you. Very good. Yeah, you traveled the world. Wherever you wanted, whenever you wanted. Took time off, this, that. How can you claim life isn't fair? Say, but, I'm 65 years old. I shouldn't die. Okay, so King David says you get 70 years. Psalm 90, you get 70 years. Right? If you have strength, 80 years, everything over that's a bonus. So you get another 5 years to go. You get 5 years early. Right? How can a person claim life isn't fair? Yeah. Now, what's the third scenario? Third scenario, what's the person going to say? They're not going to say life isn't fair. What are they going to say? They're going to say, this is a major wake-up call. They're going to die. Yeah. Essentially, they're going to die soon. Right? Now, it doesn't mean God can't stop it. And God can't give a person longer life and take this away. Okay. But now, what's the third scenario? The third scenario is that a person's going to think, okay, my life is ending. What do I have to show for my life? What do I have to show for what I've done in the world? What's my legacy going to be? Right? What's my legacy going to be? The person will say, I was a good spouse. I did everything I could for my kids, my grandkids. Okay. Is that it? I think, I gave I gave some money to charity, helped others here and there. Okay. What essentially could they be asking? They could be asking, what am I doing here? What's my purpose here? I ate to live and I live to eat. It was all one vicious cycle. Right? To go to high school and college, get a good job, get married, have a few kids maybe, maybe a couple of houses, travel, see the world, and that's it. Okay, but is that what life's about? It's a cycle. You got to take all these classes to make money in theory. Right? Not true. I think it's one of the biggest lies, top 5 lies in the world. They need a college degree to make money. It's certainly not true, but that's not the point. Right? So they may ask the question, but I'm in a rat race. Total rat race. I did all these things, right? In order to be successful, I became successful, and then this happened. So they say, is that what life is? Now that could get them to ask the question, what am I living for? Could. They could also be very bitter, right? Go back to the second scenario. They could be very bitter and say, it doesn't matter I had all these good things. I should still continue to have them, and I shouldn't be sick. Very good, but you are. You weren't given a choice. Right? And there are many diseases and things, we don't have a clue how they come. And some will say it's because of all the processed food we eat, and that's what it causes. Right? It could be any number of reasons. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. But you got it. So again, a person could be bitter. Now, this 2 and 3 could be combined maybe. Because the person's bitter and they say, oh, look what happened over here. I have so much to live for. Why did it happen? So that could be a subset and ask the question, okay, so if it did happen, then what was I supposed to be doing in this world? What was my purpose in this world? Was it just to eat all kinds of treats? That was my purpose. Watch all these movies and sporting events. That was my purpose. Besides raising a family and doing all these things. That may get them to ask the question, maybe. Or what are they going to say? What's the flip side? Flip side is my bad luck. My bad luck. Why is it my bad luck? Because it happened to me. Did not happen to someone else. It happened to me. They're not in the prime of life. Okay. They already know, the body's winding down, when you hit a certain age, certain things you can't do anymore. Can't eat as much food anymore. Got limitations now that you didn't have when you were younger. Okay. But it begs the question, though. Someone could, on the one hand, someone's going to say it's not fair, this and that. But look how, life isn't fair, but you were well off for many years. You still are well off. Yeah, you're not going to lose that money. Again, you might have to have a major operation, but you're not going to lose the money. Money's there. It's supposed to be provided for. It's not going to be a problem. Yeah, there's plenty of money. Okay. See, but that's the whole thing. Right? That's the whole thing, because now, imagine if they make this claim. The claim is going to be, life isn't fair. Now, if you see how they live their lives, you can't make that claim. Cannot make that claim. They didn't have any children that died in their lifetime. They have, okay, they had other things went on in their lives. Very good. Yeah. But if this was stable for years and years, they had plenty of money and they could travel and this and that. Very good. You want to tell me that's not, life isn't fair? Very hard thing to say. I can understand why they would say it. And the other spouse, obviously, if things are going well, they're devastated. 100% they're devastated. They don't want to see their spouse suffer. They don't want to see them go through this, right? And they can spend, a lot of time in tears. Literally in tears. But see, this is the problem. You can't have your cake and eat it. You can't say, well, life isn't fair. Look what happened so young, relatively young. I mean, you're not talking in the 30s. You make that claim. I know somebody that, somebody has to move, to a nearby community because they have a brother-in-law's dying of cancer, 37. 37. You're lucky to be alive the next 2 years, but he's got a bunch of little kids. He's got like 4 little kids. So they have to move to help his family. They don't want to move. They don't have any interest in moving. They have to move because, this woman's going to be without a husband. And, he's going to have a hard time raising 4 kids, 5 kids, whatever it is. Right? So they're going to step in to help. He's 37 years old. That's tragedy. Absolutely. I mean, it's not getting better. Right? I mean, God should help. Give him a foolish label. And heal him. But according to nature, give him a year to live at that. Yeah. They're not, this other person doesn't have that. First of all, they're already double the age almost. And there are financial issues. So they don't have financial issues. Right? Now, the mentality is going to be very different. Because even Orthodox Jews condemned, let's say, to die in that sense, their mentality is totally different. Because they know what they're living for. They're not going to say, well, it's my bad luck, this and that. Okay. People will pray for them, they'll do what they can, as many mitzvahs as they can, even their weakened state. Try and maximize whatever they can maximize. But you say, at a very young age, that's tragic. For sure it's tragic. I would say at any age it's tragic, but younger age is much worse. We look at it as much worse. Right? But, see, this is the catch-22. If you don't have God in your life, you don't have Torah mitzvahs in your life. So you could say, but he's got everything to live for. Very good. No one's denying that. He's got every last thing to live for. Yeah, in physical terms. He's got a family, very good. Yeah, you know, a person has a few houses, wants to travel, he's got what to live for. But a person could claim, wrongly, they could claim, it's not fair. Now, we all understand why they would say that. They still have a spouse, they're not so old, a bunch of little grandkids, they want to see them grow up, maybe even get married. Maybe. Yeah, they want to see the continuation. They want to get the fruit of their labor. Very good. Makes perfect sense. But the $1 million question, or $1.5 million question would be, if we're looking at it from a Torah perspective, does this person have what to say at all? Again, we can't judge a person, as we always say, unless you've been in their shoes. Very good. Right? Unless you've been in their same situation. Okay. But at the end of the day, do they have the ability in general to make the claim after they've had such a good life for the last 30 years or more, right? In physical terms, do they have the ability to say life isn't fair? Now, I can think of 1,000 scenarios or more, which I won't, that people can make that claim. That life isn't fair. Forget about seeing the bigger picture and God in the world and this and that. They can make claims. They can make claims. What family did to them, what friends did to them, other things that they can have serious claims. Right? As we always say, but what about all the good? Seeing the bigger picture. Okay, we won't use that. We won't use that. But let's say this person who we're talking about doesn't have any serious setbacks. I'm not saying they didn't have difficulty. Yeah. Let's say, parents died and suffered and went through other things. Okay. Everyone goes through these things. They're not special in that sense. Right? But do they have a claim that's on the floor? Do they have a claim to say life isn't fair? Now, if you compare them to other people, then we throw it right out the window. Compare it to someone, you have a person had a child, God forbid, had leukemia. Always had to be checked, always is, let's say they're still alive, okay. Or that other hardship. Yeah. If they look at it in those terms, they're going to say, I'm the richest person in the world. Thank you very much. You don't want to compare it to that. Or, major upheavals in a person's life. Let's say people had to move, a whole bunch of times and this and that. Never stationed in one place for too long and all the problems that it brings with it. You didn't have that. I can think of a lot of scenarios. That wouldn't have any claim at all. Again, it's an easy situation to go through. Nobody's saying it is. But in the bigger scheme of things, somebody will point out, because people don't think life is fair because they compare it to world standards. Okay. All right, that may be true. Yeah, but they're not looking at it realistically. Right? Some people, I'll give an example. Some people, let's say, are upper middle class. They can't understand why someone's working or two people are working, they can't make ends meet. They can't get behind on different things. But you know what? That's how a lot of people live. Most people today, more than half of the people live paycheck to paycheck, day to day. That's how they live. Whether they have a big family or a small family. Yeah, that's how people live. Now, if someone is upper middle class, I can't understand that. We made our money, other people made their money. Why should someone later in life, have difficulty? Well, there are a lot of reasons. They made a bunch of weddings. That could be a reason. Yeah, I can think of a lot of reasons. Business slows down. That could be another reason. That takes you time to catch up. I can think of a lot of reasons. but they can't understand. In this conversation, I was talking to someone at a wedding last week, whatever, an old friend of mine, he told me, and whatever, we were talking about whatever, business, other things, and most of the country, there was a stat many years ago that, people, if you have a certain thing set up in the bank, you can get, you can go in overdraft. Yeah, to however much, yeah. So I think many years ago, the stat was there were like billions of shekels of people in overdraft. Billions of shekels, that's how people live. So again, you make less money, okay, certain things offset, to the States or whatever, but okay, a lot of people in the red, very good, or not so good. So a friend of mine spoke to a bank manager. Now, a bank manager, should make halfway decent money. So he asked about people being in the red. It's like, oh yeah, most of the bank, most of the people in the red. Now, a bank makes money on that. They make interest on that. Okay. Which is kind of problematic, charge Drew's interest, but that's not the point. So the friend of mine asked, bank manager, are you in the red every month? Tried to pin him down. Yeah. So even with whatever a bank manager makes, not small money here, not a small amount of money, let's say, everyone's in the same boat, right? Some better, some worse. But everyone's in the same boat. In the States, probably other places, certainly in the States, there's a big difference between those that have and those that don't. Huge difference. Houses they have, cars they drive, big difference. Here you can't really tell the difference. Yeah, again, some people have fancier cars, not, whatever it is, but everyone's in the same boat. I know someone started a company, I don't know, 10 years ago, 13 years ago. About 13 years ago, he's got a whole bunch of employees, wants to, really expand, and one of the things he said about himself and his kids is we all drive jalopies. Yeah, we're driving cars that are like, older cars. I mean, he wants to make it big. Yeah, he wants to make it big. Very good. But then you got, big tax issue here and other things. Okay. Right. Sometimes it's worth it not to start a business because of everything else. Okay. Even without going into that. Yeah. So the person got, I don't know, 10 employees, 9, 10 employees. Yeah. They're expanding, not probably as fast as they want, but whatever. They can certainly hire, a whole number of people, as well. Right? He's not making, I wouldn't say he's making, tons of money. He's probably doing all right, but, it's a grind. Right? So, okay, so you see this guy owns a company, very good. He's got a small office, okay. Got other expenses, very good. He's driving jalopy. Yeah, I can say, oh, it's because of taxes, because of gas, whatever. Right? If you're telling me he's making, $15,000 a month, $20,000 a month, okay, good, part of that's going to taxes, whatever. He wouldn't be, driving a jalopy, okay. Yeah. But, money goes. So, like, even someone owns the company, okay, it's not a huge company. Where's the biggest money today in Israel? It's people in high tech. They're getting paid the most, right? They're getting paid the most. Okay, and everyone else, is compared to the average salary, it's like half that. Half that. It's like that. It depends what a person goes into. Doctors certainly don't make a lot of money here, because everything's subsidized and. Yeah, okay. Even without going into all that, but what's the point? What's the point? Even this bank manager should be making halfway decent money. Probably also in the debt, in the red. Now you could say living above his means, other things. Okay, whatever. Not going into that. What's the point though? Right? I don't want to get lost in my own parables here. What's the idea? Right? The idea is what a person thinks they should have. Or even better, what they do have. Yeah. So if they're doing okay, they're never in the red. They got plenty of money, right? And they travel, and they have, let's say an extra house. They can go and do whatever they want, right? Let's say, do they have the rights to make the statement, life isn't fair? As we said, I could give 1,000 scenarios. It wouldn't be a problem, right? Probably even more. Would not be an issue to give all these scenarios where would not say that. Right? In other words, scenarios where life doesn't look like it's fair. Yeah. I'll just give one example. Take someone like Nissim Black. Nissim Black, famous singer, rapper, whatever. Convert, grew up in Seattle, grew up in a crack den. Grew up in a crack den. Saw parents get arrested, other people get arrested, right? Whatever. He's smoking weed like the age of 10, 12, whatever it was. He should be dead, according to him. He should have been dead already. Right? Many times over. Many times over. Now, this is how he grew up. And he was able to come out of it. Not only come out of it, right? Became a Ger Tzedek, became a true righteous convert, right? And all that, doing good things for the Jewish people, no question. Right? Whether you like his music or not, it's a different issue. But he could have obviously asked that question. What am I doing growing up in such a family? In such a messed up situation. Grew up literally in a crack house. So relatives thrown out, people being arrested, all kinds of things, as a kid, as a young adult. That's a pretty bad way to grow up, I would think. Yeah, that must be pretty hard. Can't imagine. That's worse. That's the worst case scenario. So this is a success story. This is a huge success story. And other people like him, grew up in a similar way, they're no longer in this world. And most likely they died either teenagers in their early 20s, if that. Right? Those are the facts on the street. Now, a person can ask that question easily. If they were going to ask the question, what am I doing here? What am I doing? They don't know any better. They don't know anything else. It's not really given that choice somehow. Right? God runs the world. Why these people are there, why they're doing what they're doing, don't know. Right? Don't know. But you can easily ask the question, why do I have to grow up in this messed up thing? Yeah, that's a legitimate question. Physical abuse, psychological abuse, body, destroying your body in the process? Easily could ask the question. People scarred for life, imagine, someone saw as a kid, like, police breaking into the house, arresting people, this and that. Sure, when they get older, anytime they hear a knock on the door, they probably jump or go hide under a bed or something. Could have total anxiety from that. Not to mention trauma. Can certainly happen. Can happen with less things. That you could easily ask the question, why did the person have to go through that? Very good. Right? That I would understand. That would make perfect sense. Perfect sense. But if you've grown up for the last 30 years or more, right? Then no matter you worked hard for it and this and that, very good. You're living in the lap of luxury for the most part, never lacking anything. Does that person have a right to say life isn't fair? Now, they can say yes. They absolutely can say yes. Because this shouldn't happen at this time. It shouldn't happen ever. But okay. As we said before, it'd be worse if you're in the prime of life. Good? It'd be a lot worse. You're not in the prime of life. But Rebbe would say, when should a person start thinking about the next world? Right? The age of 50. Why the age of 50? Because that's when the Levites stop working in the temple. The age of 50. So he learns from there. That's when a person starts, waning down their life a little bit, start thinking about the next one. But most of their life is over. It shouldn't be that a person gets a wake-up call, a health scare, let's say, in this case, and that should wake them up. Now, God's got a lot of ways, as we always say, to wake up a person. One way is make something happen somewhere in the world, make you think about life. If that doesn't work, then a person should repent. What does God do? He hits you in the pocket. If that doesn't work, and God gives you a lot of time, if that doesn't work, you get hit in the pocket, guess what? Where does God hit you in the body? He doesn't want to have to hit you in the body. That's the obvious question. If God's going to hit you, why does he hit you in the body first? Why do all these things first before he hits you in the body? Just hit you in the body. You get the point, maybe. What's the answer? Because God has mercy. God wants you to see things outside of what's going on, so therefore you wake up. And then once you wake up, you repent. Very good. It doesn't always work. Because you hear about that, say it's so far away, it's not going to affect me, it's not this, not that, okay. It happens in some faraway country, it's mostly non-Jews and this, okay, doesn't affect me. Get hit in the pocket, that affects you. Yeah, that affects you more. So God gives you an opportunity. He gives you an opportunity to see what's going on in the world. What's going on in your own life. If that doesn't work you up, God says, okay. If that doesn't wake you up, and what does God have to do? He has to hit you in the body. If anyone who gets hit in the body makes them think. They can't function. Anyone's got the flu, there's been a wicked flu this season this year. A lot of people got it, they're out for, days. I know someone told me a while ago, whatever, they got the flu, took them 2 weeks, come back. 2 weeks. That's how bad the body was infected. Right? Affected. Yeah. Okay. But when you're affected like that, you can't function. It's impossible to function. You don't want to eat, you don't want to sleep. Or someone got the flu, they lost 10 pounds. They said, well, aren't you glad you lost 10 pounds? Yeah, but not that way. They totally lost appetite. Yeah, I don't know if they were throwing up, not throwing up, whatever, but they didn't feel well. They didn't feel well, 10 days, whatever it was. It took a toll on the body. No matter, person younger, older, whatever, it took a toll on the body. The person didn't feel like eating, was nauseous a lot of the time. So they lost weight. Is that a good way to lose weight? No. Probably not a good way to lose weight. But sometimes that's what has to happen. Right? You have to be affected in a certain way, right? Before a person, wakes up. Because all these things come for one reason in general. It's all because of sin, one way or the other. That's where it comes from. It comes from our own actions. Now, there's some things, we've spoken before about some, things our soul has to go through. Okay. But 99% of what we go through, in general, is what we've done. It's because of our own actions. Doesn't mean every last thing, just about it is a lot. I would say most things. Most things a person goes through is because of what you've done in this world. What you've done now. Previously, whatever. Right? There are some things the person may have to get punished for because of what? Because of what they did before. Now they have to get punished in this world. Okay. Right? So that I can hear, but it's not the majority of a person's life. Certainly not. Right? It could be a case where like, this week's part talks about, what do you call it? Monetary laws. There could be a case where a person loses in Beis Din. They lose in the rabbinical court. Someone makes a claim against them. They lose. Why'd they lose? Again, according to the case, they never should have lost. But why'd they lose? Not because the Beis Din's corrupt. Right? And let's say even if it would be. Yeah, let's say something happened against your will that never should have happened. Okay. Why did it happen? Why did it happen? So it could be in a previous life, you're obligated money. So this way, you got to lose it. Right? And it had to be in a way that was above nature, like never should have happened. Right? Something like that. So that can happen. That certainly can happen. Right? So that's the case where we would see that there's something else going on, because you'll say it's not fair, right? You had the case won and something else happened and now you lost. But you never should have lost according to nature. According to nature, never should have happened. So why'd it happen? That's the reason. You need to take the loss for something you did before. Okay. But most things a person does or goes through is because of what we've done. Right? What we've done. Now again, some people will say, I'm trying, I'm working hard, this, that, and I don't have it coming to me. This seemingly isn't fair. So, we've spoken about that. Right? So again, it's not a question of what's fair or not fair. Right? The person's on a different level now. It's a different standard. God looks at you. Now, as a potato farmer, an idol, right? No offense to anyone's a potato farmer, grew up an idol. They're not, they know better. So therefore, the repercussions are much greater. Okay. But in this case, a person could make the claim and say, not in godly terms, not in spiritual terms. Yeah, they can say it's unfair. I get everything to live for. Why should this happen? Good. Now, for some people, either it's going to make them just give up on life in general. Others, will fight it to the end because they want to live. They may not be successful. But what can happen is, in my third case scenario, or 2B, whatever I would call it, it could get a person out to think. It could get them to think and say, okay, this happened now. Why? Why all of a sudden now? Again, you're not in the prime of life, doesn't matter. Right? But you have everything to live for. You got plenty of money, you can travel, do things with your grandkids, all these different things. It's beautiful. But it may actually get them to question. Maybe. Right? Some people will question, and however long they have left, what they will do is try and change certain aspects of their life. Maybe they'll start asking the question, about religion and what's true and what's not true. It's sad it has to come to this. But for some people, that's the only way they're going to get the message. Now, what are the odds? Someone's going to do that? Don't know. I don't, stats. I don't know if they have, statistics on that. Someone has a life-threatening thing. How many people come to God? Probably a lot. I would think a lot of people are going to start thinking about God and what life's about. Right? Again, I don't know what, I don't know necessarily what the, what the percentage is. Let me see if there's such a thing. Let's see if there are any numbers. Yeah, no stats on that. Precise number doesn't exist, but certainly studies indicate somebody has a diagnosis of a serious life-threatening illness such as HIV. Interesting. Say HIV. But anyway, no numbers. Yeah, it would be very hard to put numbers. Yeah, so there are no stats. Yeah, there are no stats, not surprising. But it will get people to think, right? It will generate people to think and potentially want to come to religion. Yeah, any religion, or the religion they grew up in, or religion or they'll search, right? They'll search what they think may be true, may not be true, and why. Why? Because, as we always say, no atheist in a foxhole. So that means that, even a person's, let's say, suffering and maybe potentially at death's door, they want to live, right? Most people, I mean, there are people once they hit a certain age or older, they're just, because of all the ailments and everything they go through, because we can live a lot longer today than before, people don't want to live that way. They don't want to live, they can't see, they can't hear, they can't, they can't do very much and all that. They don't want to live like that. So we don't want to be put in a nursing home, God forbid, or other things. And I've heard some people say, if I get to a certain point, I'm just going to take a blue pill and that's going to be it. I don't want to, suffer being in these places. Okay, right? We don't, we're not really given much of a choice, right? King David says, "Al tashlichenu zikna." We don't want to be thrown out. You don't throw us out at our old age, so to speak. Yeah, so you have to know what to live for. You don't have to know how to die also. Okay. There are people at a certain point, like, they don't want the heroics, they don't want to, they want have quality of life. However you define, what quality of life is. But But in either case, I would think a lot of people, or some people, I don't know, that some people that when something like this happens, it's gonna go one of two ways. Either they're gonna say it's my bad luck, and that's it. More of their atheistic ways coming out. Or they're gonna say, what am I living for? Right? There can be people that aren't religious or were never religious, right? Let's say. Now all of a sudden, they want to be somewhat of a believer. They want to believe, hopefully, they're going to a good place. They want to believe in other things and don't want to believe just they're going to the ground, be resigned to that. So they may look into things. Again, we don't have, we don't have stats, we don't have stats on that. But I would think that, some people are going to go on that path. Some people are going to try and make sense of it, try and understand, maybe try and believe in a higher being, whether it's part of a quote unquote organized religion or not. They're not meaning. They don't want to see it's all meaningless. A person gets to a certain point, and like, let's say in this case this happened, so they can easily ask the question again, why is this happening? Life isn't fair, or ask a little bit deeper and say, okay, this happened, life has been very good, okay, so why is this happening now? Why am I going through this now? And they may start, to delve into things a little bit. Not just say life isn't fair. But they could say, well, what's the purpose of life? That's going a little bit deeper, a little bit more meaning now. No pun intended. What's it all about? Right? What's the purpose? Could generate that. Right? I think some people will be generated by that. Other people could just say, my bad luck. It's not fair. I'm gonna die, make the most of whatever I've left, and that's it. Right? But people do not think about this. When they're much younger, they don't think about the meaning of life. Right? A lot of people, why not? They're, prime of their life. They don't think anything's gonna happen. They don't think anything bad's gonna happen to them. In that sense. So they live however they live, do whatever they want, and that's it. Right? They're not thinking about the bigger picture. I'm gonna say, come on, when I die, that's for old people. It's not for me, nothing's gonna happen. Let's say nothing happens. Let's say they live life however they live life. Okay. But living life the way they live life doesn't give any meaning. At some point during a person's life, it may get them to think, what is life all about? An illness can do that. A financial upheaval certainly could do that. Seeing someone suffer, let's say, could do that. There are many things. There are many different scenarios where it could wake up a person. Or it could be, it's, man's inhumanity to man. Some people are going to die senseless deaths, which shouldn't be, and this and that. Okay. We don't believe it's senseless, but we don't understand why it happens, right? In general. Okay. Sad. You take, somebody at a, quote unquote, a pro-Palestinian, we're not going to get into politics. A pro-Palestinian, rally. Jews there sticking up for themselves. And one person like throws down somebody. Get in a fight, guy gets, let's say, sucker punch, falls, bangs head on the ground, dies. 70-year-old guys. What happened in LA? Whatever, a while ago. Last year, and a couple years ago. What happened? Guy got sucker punched or thrown to the ground, slammed his head on the ground, he died. 70 years old. 70 years old. Now, there are a lot of questions could be asked. What was he doing? What was he doing at the rally in the first place? Why did he start up with somebody? Whatever. A lot of things. A lot of things you could ask. But at the end of the day, what happened? He died. That's how God took him. That's, in the bigger scheme of things, it's a tragedy, it's no question. Right? You don't expect someone to go, to a rally or who knows what and get killed. I mean, okay, things can happen, but Person's not going to expect they ain't coming back. So, it's not putting your life in danger per se. I don't think it's a smart thing to do per se, but okay, well, I'm not going to get into about going to these protests and whatever, but in general, this person probably wasn't thinking he's going to die, right? Certainly not. But this is what happened. Yeah, either he tripped or he got thrown to the ground. I forget exactly the case. Banged his head on the ground. That was it. Like a week later, a few days later, he died. He died. You look at that situation. You look at that and you're saying senseless, right? Drive-by shooting. They weren't even, whatever. Someone shooting someone else, whatever. Person's wrong time, wrong place. Bam. Or something ricocheted. Who knows what? Anything can happen anywhere. Yeah, but if it's your time to go, it's your time to go. You're old, you're young, doesn't matter, right? Other people probably want to die, in their sleep. They don't want to suffer. We're not given a choice, right? We're born against the world, we die against the world, right? That's what the Mishnah Pirkei Avos says. Right? We have to live, Kaufman would say. Put that in parentheses, right? You still have to live, okay. But nobody's going to guarantee some life, right? Except death and taxes, not necessarily in that order. It's the way it works. Now, you see something like that, it gets you a question. Person will ask the question. Yeah. Why did it have to happen that way? Why did it have to? Because God made the decree. He made the decree that person's going to die in that way. It didn't change. It could have been other ways, and this is the way it happened. Okay. Do we understand anything? Nothing. We don't understand anything. But a person would not expect that. That's not expected. Now, when something like that happens, what does it do? What can it do? It makes someone think. Right? And a lot of people would probably say that's senseless. The second guess, what was he doing there? He shouldn't have gone there, whatever. Doesn't matter. People look at it and say it's senseless. What about in God's eyes? Death was decreed to the world, okay. How a person's going to die? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. We're not given a choice. Right? In general, we're not given a choice. But we can see things that's going to, we're going to scratch our heads and say that shouldn't be. This is senseless. Right? There are worse things that, I'm not going to categorize. I'm not going to say, okay, this is the absolute worst thing, and then, we'll go down the ladder. I'm not going to do that. Right? But there are a lot of things a person could see in this world and say, this is senseless. This is something that never should happen. Right? But then, you got gangs at different places and they kill people. Innocent people, quote unquote. Innocent people who get killed, technically. Not really innocent, but God took them that way, okay. Right? There are many, many scenarios here. But at the end of the day, what's the Torah hashkafa? What's the Torah outlook? God runs the world. He's in charge. Someone, well, my Rebbe would say, why do people die young and old? Because they die at the same age, no one will repent. Because they'll say, I got time, everyone lives to the age of 70, very good. So if you got 20 years to go, 10 years to go, 30 years to go, you're not going to repent until you get close to it. Because you're not going to die until 70. Okay. But what should these things do in general? It should shake us up. It should totally shake a person up. It should make a person realize you got no guarantees in life. You walk out that door, you can say, I'll be back in 10 minutes. I'll be back in an hour. I'll be back, whatever. I'll see you later this afternoon. Is that guaranteed? Not a guarantee. Not a guarantee. Your cases, kids die young. Diseases, other things, whatever it is. So people always say something like that happens. What do? You should hug your kid. Right? To give them more love because you don't know. You're right. Does it happen? Don't know. Right? It's something that would shake a person up. Should shake a person up. But if you think about it too much, you go crazy. Person will have heart palpitations, anxiety, any number of things, which are bad. So you don't deal with it. Why don't you deal with it? It's too hard. It's too hard. But if a person's lived most of their life, and most of their life, for the majority is good, at least in physical terms, it's been good. The person still wants to live. Yeah, in general, they still want to live. Again, some would say in our case, the Architrav say, well, you lived a good life and that's it. They want to live. Now, some will say, okay, they'll be resigned to the fact, and they'll say, we'll do whatever we can, but, it really has been a good life and whatever. Now, it could get people to think, as we said before. Yeah, it could actually, and I hear this often. People say, oh, this person's sick, pray for them. And part of me wants to say, do you really think prayer helps? Right? You're not religious. Do you think prayer helps? Well, we don't believe in God in the same way, but say prayer anyway. So you know what that means? They do believe. They just don't keep it, or they don't want to keep it, So we always say, no atheist in a foxhole. What's the greatest weapon we have? It's prayer, right? Learning Torah, prayer. That's our weapon. Someone's in danger. We need salvation. You go straight to Tehillim. You go straight to learning Torah. Yeah, that's the greatest shmir. That's the greatest guarding that we have, right? First, some people say, during the war, they said all we can do is pray because they don't live here, they can't do anything. So they say all we can do is pray. Like as if to say that's not enough. So I said, well, if you knew the power of prayer, you wouldn't say such a thing. Yeah, prayer is very powerful. It doesn't mean you get exactly what you want, per se, but no prayer goes unheard. If it doesn't help you, it can help other people. It can be used for other things. Okay, but you want to help yourself. Very good. Prayer never goes to waste. Right? As you say, but I prayed so much, it didn't change. Maybe even got worse. Okay. That doesn't mean you stop. Right? Does not mean you stop. Because God can have mercy till the very end. He can change things, as we say, Yeshua Hashem Karafayim. God can change things the blink of an eyelash. That's when the salvation can come from, obviously, a place you never thought of. That you never thought of, but it can always happen. And let's say it doesn't. Okay, that was a decree. Someone's sick, you pray for them, you work for them. You said to him all these things, they died. Yeah, let's say they died. Okay, what does that mean? It means God, God said no. But those prayers didn't go nowhere. They can be helping other people, just to help you. Right? So if someone says, well, all I can do is pray. That's because you don't understand what prayer is. That means you don't understand the power of what prayer is. Prayer is very powerful. Very, very powerful. Right? My Rebbe would say that the success in a person's learning and in everything they do starts with the way they pray. They go hand in hand. Right? If a person, is having difficulty in certain areas because the prayers aren't good. That's the opening of everything. And learning and livelihood, it starts with prayer. You got to put your best foot forward. No one's saying not. Right? Obviously, you have to put your best foot forward, but it's not a guarantee. Certainly not a guarantee. But what opens the door? What opens the door more than anything else? Prayer. Prayer opens the door. That's where it starts. That's where it ends. Right? Now, again, person can say, well, I prayed well today. Not a good thing to say, but let's say, I had better intention today, whatever. I still got the same, I'm still the same way. Okay, you don't give up. You for sure don't give up. You keep going. Right? But that's where the success comes. Right? That is the secret. That is the antidote. And even if a person didn't get necessarily the answer that they wanted, guess what? Their belief is so strong, God runs the world, it makes them a better person either way. Because they see that's where the ticket is. Right? That's where it all is. And it makes you a stronger person knowing that, you can you can give over all your problems and give it over to God. Say, listen, you're in charge. You are the one in charge. Health-wise, livelihood-wise, I'm going to try and put my best foot forward. I got an evil inclination, very good. You help me try and overcome it. This and that. I want Torah more than anything else. I'm trying, but you are the one calling the shot. That has to be acknowledged. It should be acknowledged like 1,000 times a day. You're the one in charge. That's where it starts. That's where it starts. And again, if a person doesn't get what they want, or they feel they don't get what they want, yeah, you're saying on a daily basis, God, you're the one in charge. You're the one that's going to take care of business one way or the other. I put my best foot forward, okay? So lead me in the right direction. Lead me to success. You are the big X factor. The big boss, the big X factor. Very good. That mentality draws me close. Doesn't push me away. What pushes me away is the inclination. See, you prayed well today. You learned well today. You didn't speak Lashon Hara today. Like, you can pat yourself on the back for all the good things we've done. Very good. You still didn't get the answer. So it must be God ain't listening to you, right? The evil inclination will come in 1.5 million different ways, right? Trying to convince you why you're wasting your time, why you're never going to get answered, why should I keep keeping anything? Doesn't really matter, right? Because you get the answer. Or someone says, I prayed, I said this, I said that, all these different omens. It didn't work. It got worse, right? So they said, what should I do? I said, keep doing it. That's what you do. You just keep going no matter what. That gives you the strength. Because God can change anything at any time. Seen it many times. Many, many times. Seen it by other people many times. Yeah, but that's where it all starts. It all starts, it all starts with prayer. Right? It all starts from the beginning of the day. If you pray good, yeah, your day should go good. Right? They go hand in hand. But someone will say it's not true. I did this. Okay. You think prayer is something easy? You don't think, if you were to look at yourself with a fine tooth comb, you're going to say every second of every word, that you said. And when you said it, you had the right intention. It went to the right place. You didn't get distracted. You weren't thinking about other things. I don't think it's going to be the case. I don't think you're going to get an F, but that's not going to be the case. Right? So you can understand why God wouldn't answer me. Okay. You got to try anyway. You got to work hard. Prayer is something you always have to work hard on. That's where it starts. Right? That is, that's where it starts. Spend 5 extra minutes learning Torah. 10 extra minutes learning Torah. Show God you're making a commitment. Take on something very, very small. Make a deal with God. Say, listen, if you do this, I'm going to do this, right? But you make sure it's something you can do. Something you absolutely can do. You can make conditions. Yeah, but it has to be something you can do. So all these things are, all these things are good. But again, it should not be that something had to happen. Something had to happen where it's a total wake-up call that you didn't want. Now, on the one hand, it could be good. And the reason it could be good because it wakes you up. And now you say, okay, now I'm going to change. Now I'm going to be better. Now this, now that. And God sees the change. Okay. So then the person got the message. Okay. That's the last resort. God does not want to hit the person in the body first. He gives you golden opportunity, repentance, and everything else before he does that. Now, a person got hit in the body, and maybe seriously, the wake-up call. Yeah, God's knocking on the door. He wants something. What does he want? Change. At whatever level, he wants to see change. He wants you to make the effort. But can a person get beaten down in life and say, I don't want to pray, and life isn't fair, and all these things? Sure. Right? And evil inclination will egg them on. They say, hey, look at all the things you've done, all the things you've changed, family doesn't want you, Jews don't want you, nobody wants you, and look at all the difficulty you have. Very good. Right? As we always say, evil inclination, very good at what it does. Doesn't need me to agree. Right? So someone there said before, the question was, let me just see 1 second. I said before, I speak about the evil inclination. Okay, I sort of make fun, right? And I call the evil inclination Moreno Rabbeinu. Why would I call it my Rebbe, my master? Right? It's certainly not my Rebbe. It's kind of the thing to make fun of. But why would I call it my master or my Rebbe, my master? Right? Because it has a total effect on us. Right? So you're right. Maybe it's not a good thing to say, but guess what? Our evil inclination, we're subservient to it. It's part of us, right? God should be our true master, not the evil inclination, right? But the evil inclination, yeah, guess what? It has that effect. It has that effect, to be master over us. It shouldn't be. I would agree. It shouldn't be. Yeah. So I sort of say it in jest, but there is truth to that. There is truth to the evil inclination having real power, right? And being our master. It shouldn't be our master. I agree. Right? Should not be our master. But it's everybody's master because we're always subjected to evil inclination. Now, hopefully, we're able to fight it off, right? But that anyway is why sometimes I will say, or maybe many times, I may say that it's Moreno Rabbeinu. Yeah, obviously, who's the true master? Who's the true judge? It's God Himself, right? But the evil inclination has real power. Right? So even though God should be our master, a lot of times who's our master? Our hearts, food, ball games, entertainment. That could be my master, right? And that's idolatry in different ways, right? So I sort of make fun, but there's, some would say, in every joke there's a little bit of truth, right? So, that is true. But a lot of times it is our master. Right? When really God should be the master, it takes over. That's what it does. Right? Literally can take over a person. Yeah. I think that's where I'm going to stop. Yeah. Anyone has any questions, you can find me on Facebook at Michael Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos, Q&As, Ethics for Fathers, Book of Leviticus. You want to send me an email, Rabbi Chaim Kaufman at gmail.com, RBPI, CHAIM, COFFMAN at gmail.com, which have a good